Hello, I'm Sarah Nicholson, the Director of the South Coast Writers Centre, and this is Bibliotherapy. In this episode, we have Dr Joshua Lobb, Senior Lecturer in Creative Writing at the University of Wollongong and the author of The Flight of Birds.
Today I want to talk about three books, and the three books I want to talk about are books which aren't about COVID in any way, but they kind of resonate with me because the times that we're in are so strange to me because they're simultaneously unprecedented in a sense that they're so unfamiliar, we've never been through anything like this before, but they're also really weirdly familiar. I keep thinking about the Second World War and the kind of experiences that people needed to go through with that, where they had the fear of bombs being dropped on them and had to stay inside and have all the lights off, etc. I'm thinking about plagues that have been in the world for millennia and how people engaged with those things. So when I've been reading, I've been kind of finding those resonances. So the resonances, the first book I want to talk about is Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light. And I just want to read out two lines from it that I just kind of underlined as a writer to think this is exactly how I feel right now. And this is the first quote. "We shall not escape these weeks. They recapitulate, always varied and always fresh, always doing and never doing." And I think that's just exactly what I've been feeling about the last couple of months. And the second quote is called, it says, "The past is always trickling under the soil, a slow leak that you can't trace." And I think, again, that's one of those moments where I think I read a book about Thomas Cromwell and what he's going through and how it kind of, the fear and the uncertainty of that time echoes with the fear and uncertainty that I'm travelling through right now. The second is Ali Smith's extraordinary book, Autumn, and one line which jumps out to me, which I think is really important to us right now, which is, there'll always be more story. That's what story is. And I think that's the hardest thing for me that I've had to face recently is I feel like we're at the end of the world, but in fact, there's actually always more to come. And that's sometimes frightening, but it's also something which we can kind of hold on to as a piece of hope. So the one that I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail is this extraordinary book by Sarah Maitland called Gossip from the Forest. The book is a really beautiful kind of material where she spends time writing an essay about a particular forest in the UK, and then she writes a fairy story or rewrites a fairy story that responds to that space. So it's a story of two people who have lived through something overwhelming and somehow survived by looking after each other and looking after each other during the experience as well as afterwards. And you'll recognise who the people are. "Once upon a time, there were two little children, gaunt with hunger, glazed with grief, lost in the forest. They walked hand in hand through tanglewood and terror until they came to a house made of gingerbread. A wicked witch lived there. This was a long time ago. Now they're grown up, grounded and prosperous. They've never forgotten what they learned in the woods. They used the witch's treasure trove wisely, investing first in healthy food and then in education. They continued to love and cherish each other. They always treat the world with respect, and the world repays them with safety and joy. Now Hansel is head forester to the king. He goes daily and with authority into the greenwood, walking under the trees and along the small paths with knowledge and pleasure. He looks after the trees. With Gretel, it's different. She lives alone in the forest. She's quiet, almost silent, solitary by choice. If you pass her way, you will often find her in a garden. Plants, vegetables and herbs and flowers grow well for her. Her garden is a place of colour and of sweetness. She usually stands up, easing her back with her hands, and calls out a low but cheerful greeting. I'm going to jump to the end, which is just a couple of pages in, which is Hansel and Gretel meeting up together several years after the event. They meet each other once or twice a year and have a sort of a walk in the forest together. So we read, "They go for a walk. She puts her arm around his waist and her head leans slightly against his shoulder. There's a little party of birds bustling along ahead of them, tiny pinkish balls of feathers with absurdly long tails. They do not talk much now. It's all hushed green gold and the wind has dropped away. When Hansel looks at Gretel, he sees that she is crying. Silent tears run down her cheeks, and she does not move to wipe them away. Gretel, he says quietly, so as not to break the stillness. I killed her, she says, in the same whispered tone. I killed the witch. I pushed her into an oven and I killed her dead. She was wild and fierce and free, and I killed her. You had to, he said. You had to. She would have killed and eaten me. Would she, Hansel? Would she? I try to remember, and it's all like a story. Are they true, these stories? Are they ever true? Sometimes they're true, he says, with great gentleness. She turns and lays her head against his chest. They stand in the sunlit wood, and he holds her. Here's a true story, he says. Once upon a time, there was a brave little girl, and she had a foolish brother, a weak and pathetic father, and an evil, cruel stepmother who certainly wanted to kill her. But in terrible fear, in the raging of danger and sadness and terror, she kept her head. She rescued them both. That is a good story. That is a true story.